Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by the boxing channel known as AKHi TV. And recently, I thought that I would talk about this video because for those of you that go back far enough, you may know that the inception of this channel, or that the reason kind of why this channel was created, was not only mainly to talk about boxing, but also to kind of talk about certain controversies, or at least alleged controversies, and kind of put a little bit more of a truthful spin on things. Because many people, especially whenever it comes to sports, whether it be boxing or whether it be basketball or football, whatever it may be, you have certain people complaining about the refs, or complaining about a certain call, or complaining maybe about a decision. We see it in fights all the time where people say that this fight was a quote unquote robbery, or that this ended up happening, and they really have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Well, a big part of the reason why I eventually started, to try and start another boxing channel, because I had an older one several years ago, but the reason why I did this one was because of the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder fiasco, which of course was happening after the rematch, when Tyson Fury, of course, was able to completely dominate and pretty much, absolutely, embarrass Deontay Wilder in the rematch. And of course, AKHi TV, who was gaining in popularity at the time, he was, of course, one of the main guys, along with Dante's Boxing Nation and a lot of the LDBC and new media, that was creating this bullshit narrative that Tyson Fury was using all these cheating tactics. And that's not me stating that maybe Tyson Fury, that maybe that all his tactics are on the up and up. Of course, we've heard about, the possibility of him being on steroids in the past with, that of the boar meat and all that other stuff. And of course, we've heard about maybe some other things as well. Of course, there was that one elbow that landed in the Francis Ngannou fight, and I can't really tell whether that was 100% on purpose or not, but even if it was, point is this: the quote unquote cheating tactics that AKHi TV and all these LDBC and new media channels, what they were trying to state about Tyson Fury, almost none of it was true whatsoever. Whether they were talking about Tyson Fury removing padding from the glove, or putting egg weights in his glove, or putting his hand lower into the glove, poisoning Deontay Wilder, all this other stupid bullshit, none of it made any sense. And it pretty much could be countered with anyone that knew really anything about the sport and knew common sense. Really, the way that you can kill that narrative is that if Tyson Fury really did cheat, and you knew damn well that Deontay Wilder didn't truly believe that either, because if Deontay Wilder truly believed that, why would you fire Mark Breland? Mark Breland was the one that pretty much saved your life from getting killed in that rematch in the second fight, because you were getting your ass whooped from pillar to post. Overall, he ended up stopping the fight pretty much for your own health and safety, but he's not the one that watched Tyson Fury wrap his gloves nor wrap his hands. So, or put on his gloves and wrap his hands. That was JD's. JD's was the main Caucasian trainer that was mainly there for Deontay Wilder. Mark Breland, of course, was the black, former champion coach, for America, that was for Deontay Wilder. And he fired Mark Breland. Deontay Wilder, for being so pro-black, apparently, so for his people, he's the one that threw one of his better black forces in his corner completely under the bus, which was a very shameful move in my view. Not necessarily that he fired Mark Breland, that's his decision, but to claim all this bullshit about how he betrayed him and all this other stuff, to state that, he poisoned him, right? But then you don't fire the trainer in JD's that, apparently you allege that Fury used egg weights and all this other bullshit, when it comes down to it, and then you don't fire JD's. That's how you could tell that Deontay Wilder, not even he fully on believed that shit. And to this day, AKHi TV and these guys, they don't have one answer as to why, if Deontay Wilder truly believed that, why was JD's not fired? You know why that is? Because AKHi TV and Dante, a lot of these guys are full of the shit most of the time. It is what it is. But the reason why I talk about this video today is because, once again, talking about things like this pretty much was the beginning of my channel, probably about 4 to 5 years ago. Now, when you talk about quote unquote fighters that are actually cheating in a fight or use very, very dirty tactics, there's been a few fighters that I've seen, throughout the history of boxing, or even some of the greater fighters of all time that many people would kind of question to where their career was a little bit clean, or, if they had a little bit of dirty tactics. Of course, one of my favorite fighters to watch, Mr. Canelo Alvarez, we all know that, of course, at one point in time, he was caught on clenbuterol. He was caught on PEDs. Of course, when you talk about that, of Ryan Garcia, he was recently caught on PEDs as well against that of a Devin the Dream Haney. Evander Holyfield, of course, was known, from a lot of fighters for using his headbutts in certain fights. Certain people would, of course, debate against that, but, I guess it's up to you and your perspective. Bernard Hopkins, of course, who was a dirty bastard throughout his career, although he was a great fighter. Andre SOG Ward to a certain degree, even though he was a great fighter. And I'm sure a couple of other fighters that maybe I'm not mentioning. Of course, the worst case in my personal view that I've ever seen, or the worst tactic that I've ever seen was used by that of Antonio Margarito, who of course was a fighter that I believe was from Mexico or from that of California. I cannot personally remember, where of course he used a plaster of Paris. But anyways, point being is this. When you talk about in terms of a fight, like when I heard all the comparisons with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, the way that they were actually talking about Fury back then should be the way that all of these channels, the LDBC and new media channels, should be talking about Gervonta Tank Davis. Because they were talking about Tyson Fury back then, talking all this shit about, oh, well, Tyson Fury, he cheated, a brother in Deontay Wilder, overall. And the reason why he gets away with it is because he's a Caucasian and because he has the complexion for the protection and all sort of bullshit, when it came down to it. But to this day, Deontay Wilder has never sued Tyson Fury, at least overall, for allegedly cheating in a match, and he still has not fired JD's. Ain't that a bitch? Or I mean, overall, maybe, he changed his head trainer, but JD's I still do believe is in his corner. But let me tell you this, just personally, when you talk about a main event fighter, I've seen certain fighters to where they've done a little bit of dirty tactics. I think Andre Ward at times would kind of, maybe throw a bit too low. Bernard Hopkins would use his head as a battering ram, and, maybe some other fighters, that I can't necessarily think of that I think would have a little bit of dirty tactics. Of course, if you've seen Nick Ball recently today, you know that he had a little bit of a bad showing as well. But in terms of a main event caliber fighter like a Gervonta Tank Davis, someone who's supposed to be looked at as one of the main faces of boxing, I've never seen someone do about 2 or 3 cheap or dirty tactics in a fight the way that he did. Not only did I see him land multiple low blows, and I mean, I can kind of almost forgive that because it's not like I seen something that was like Zab Judah versus Mayweather-esque or anything like that. I didn't see a major low blow. It wasn't like a Abner Mares versus Joseph Agbeko fight, or even the Salido versus Lomachenko fight, for example, which was a lesser version of that in my personal view. But like when you talk about this fight, not only was he clearly trying to throw Lamont Roach off of his rhythm, at times he was throwing a bit low. He shouldered Lamont Roach Jr. straight in the face. On top of that, he took a knee out of nowhere, which was supposed to immediately be counted as a knockdown, which was completely blown by that of the referee. I understand why the referee was a little bit confused, but you're still supposed to call that as a knockdown because it didn't happen at the very beginning of the round. It didn't happen overall where he said, hey, give me some extra time. I have to clean my eyes, and certain people would debate that even that shouldn't be allowed. Like, for those of you that remember a UFC event that happened a very long time ago between that of Yoel Romero and Tim Kennedy, Yoel Romero, I believe, was hurt very badly in the second round at the end of that round. And Yoel Romero, his team, they did a tactic to where, they kind of waited, for an extra 20 to 30 seconds because they knew that he was hurt. And that's kind of a tactic that certain boxers will use. For those of you that also remember the Araceli Lara versus Austin Trout fight, Lara hurt Austin Trout very badly, I believe, in one of the latter rounds. I think it was like the 9th or the 10th round, maybe even the 11th round. But I think going into the 11th round, Austin Trout, they knew that he was still buzzed. And that Lara, that he had the skill set and he also had the power over Austin Trout. And that if he hit him again, he could possibly either be knocked down or knocked out in the fight. So what they did is that they wiped his corner, overall poured a little bit more water on the mat and wiped his corner to give him a little bit of extra time. All those, are a little bit of cheap tricks that can kind of be used in boxing. But when you talk about this, I don't think I've ever seen a fighter use 3 or 4 different dirty tactics in a fight. And then apparently in recent footages, it appears that Gervonta Tank Davis is actually trying to bite that of Lamont Roach Jr. So this guy shouldered Lamont Roach Jr. right in the face. He took a knee, which should have been counted as a knockdown, and completely got away with it. And then he tried to bite this dude. Now, to be fair, I mean, maybe he was trying to put in his mouthpiece or something like that. It doesn't really appear like the bite had any impact, even if he did try to bite him. But once again, the way that these channels were talking about Fury so long ago, it's really the way that they should be talking about Gervonta Tank Davis. But I just find it so interesting, even though some of these channels, they're kind of going after Gervonta Tank Davis now because he's talking shit on other black fighters like Crawford and Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney. They still won't go as far with Gervonta Tank Davis as what they did with Tyson Fury. I wonder why that is. Or with other certain fighters that are not black fighters. And that's why I say, you cannot take a lot of boxing channels very seriously because most of them, not just the LDBC and the media channels, but a lot of them in general, but many people, especially within the sport of boxing, are very racially motivated, But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what Mr. AKHi TV has to say.
That's when he tried biting. I ain't even noticed that till somebody said something.
And listen, once again, I don't like to incriminate people without 100% evidence. We cannot really see the angle. So I'm not going to say 100% that he did bite Lamont Roach Jr. But if you were just to personally ask me, it did look like he was trying to bite Lamont Roach Jr. Just with the face and everything that I seen and the angle and the muscles and the muscles of the face, it looked like he was trying to bite Lamont Roach Jr., but that either A, he missed and kind of got it at the wrong angle, or B, that he decided to retract it at the last minute in order, for it not to become a worse situation. And I'm sure the referee, would have let it slide anyway because the referee was doing an absolute awful job.
That's when he tried biting. I ain't even know. That's when he tried biting.
That looks almost exactly how Mike Tyson did it. Mike Tyson put his head near Evander Holyfield's ear, kind of, put it really close, tilted his head towards the side a little bit, took a nip really quick and then returned it back to normal position. That looks almost exactly how Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear. Now, I mean, once again, could be wrong. Maybe he was just trying to put in his mouthpiece or something like that. I don't know. But to be honest with you, this doesn't look good.
I ain't even noticed that till somebody said something.
What you was thinking when Tank did that when he took the knee? What you was thinking when he took the knee?
I can't speak on it.
Can't speak on that?
Can't speak on it.
He did some bullshit though?
I can't speak on it.
You have no personal opinion, nothing?
Can't. Especially.
The thing that Lamont Roach Jr. did so well against Gervonta Tank Davis that many others were not able to do is that he actually fought him at certain times, I'm not going to say completely inside the pocket, but inside a range that a lot of fighters are not really willing to fight Gervonta Tank Davis in. They're really willing to go to war with him, or at least Lamont Roach Jr. was willing to go to war with him. Rolly Romero, of course, he kind of went to war with Tank to a certain degree, but he didn't really do it intelligently enough. Rolly Romero has a very low boxing skill set and very low boxing IQ. He has great power. Like, Rolly Romero is like, he's like a mule. People like, when that saying, you punch, like a mule kicks. Rolly Romero can punch like what a mule kicks, but he's got the boxing brain of a mule. He has no boxing IQ whatsoever. Lamont Roach Jr. actually has somewhat of good relative boxing IQ. What I'm also going to state is this. Many people have actually been talking about the Gervonta Tank Davis versus Inoue fight, and many people have actually stated now that if they were in the same weight class, or that if this fight were to happen, that Inoue would more than likely beat Gervonta Tank Davis. We all know the narrative that Dante's Boxing Nation and AKHi TV have been trying to place upon Canelo Alvarez, which is that people are actually picking Crawford over Canelo Alvarez. It just goes to show how limited Canelo is because he's up a couple of weight classes. Are they going to state the same thing with Gervonta Tank Davis? Does this mean that later on, if Gervonta Tank Davis beats Devin Haney and beats guys like Lomachenko and Shakur Stevenson, if Inoue then beats guys like Bam Bam Rodriguez and other guys like that, does that mean that Inoue immediately is going to be over the pound for pound list over Gervonta Tank Davis? Are they going to hold the same standards? I highly doubt it, but we'll see. Because one of the points that they were always trying to make in comparison to Canelo to make him look bad, was that, oh, well, if Inoue moved up to fight Gervonta Tank Davis, no one would be favoring Inoue over Gervonta Tank Davis. Well, they can't really use that point anymore. So we'll see what happens. And for all intents and purposes, I would not favor Inoue in a fight over Gervonta Tank Davis. Not only overall because I actually think Gervonta at his best is a very good fighter, and I've been saying that he's been exceptional for a very long time. But to be honest with you, after this fight, I don't think that I can say that anymore. I need to see in the rematch if he's able to really adjust. Because to be quite honest with you, he did not look like a great fighter in that fight. He just didn't. And it's not like Gervonta Tank Davis. It's not like he's super dominant in all of his fights. Like, he had a very tough time against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. I thought that he was losing a certain amount of rounds against Rolly Romero and also against that of Hector Garcia, and Mario Barrios for that matter. Although Barrios, of course, was bigger, but it's not like Barrios was a legit A-grade level fighter like what Caleb Plant or Callum Smith would have been, like against Canelo Alvarez or something. So, I mean, it is what it is. But anyway.
I broke a chair at my best friend's house during her engagement dinner. That's when I realized I had to do something about my weight. It was
It's great that Lamont Roach Jr. was able to do that, and not to interrupt this video too much, but in the rematch, I would have to favor Gervonta Tank Davis. And the reason why that is because, first of all, he's the A side. If the fight is very close, they're going to give it to him more than likely. He has way too much money attached to him for Al Heyman. And not me alleging in any way that Al Heyman is a quote-unquote dirty promoter or anything like that. Listen, boxing and fighting in general, they're the dirtiest, sports on the planet. But especially boxing. At the end of the day, all promoters, they know which fighters have, make their bread buttered. It is what it is. Gervonta Tank Davis is the PBC's kingpin right now. They need him for their golden boy. It is what it is. So, I mean, not only that, but on top of that, what I will state is this. Lamont Roach did certain tactics that really worked within this fight, but he's going to have to really use his feet more and really use his jab a bit more. He kind of, at certain times, even though I thought he did a very good job, there were certain times where I thought that he was a little bit too reliant on the counter. Sometimes you need to be a little bit first, not to the point to where, you're first every single time so that your opponent, knows how to counter you. But I mean, at the end of the day, you need to be first to a certain degree. And sometimes it just felt like Lamont Roach Jr. was a little bit too reactive, although, of course, he did a very great job. But he's going to have to mix it up a little bit, do a little bit of this, but also use his feet a little bit more, use a little bit more lateral movement, get outside of the range, and use that jab a bit more, man. But will he do that? I'm not sure. Because to be quite honest with you, a lot of these fighters, when they end up pulling off a somewhat upset, they end up usually, or not even a somewhat upset, but either a draw or, a upset draw or something like that. Usually the fighter ends up coming back in the rematch and ends up winning because they end up being smarter. And on top of that, the fighter ends up coming in and they say, well, I'm just going to do the exact same thing as what I did in the first fight. And you can't do that. We've seen that with Brian Castano and Jermell Charlo in the second fight. We've seen that with Jermell Charlo and Tony Harrison in the second fight. We've seen that with Mayweather and Maidana. We've seen that with Ward and Kovalev. We've seen that overall with, a certain amount of other guys. Golovkin versus Canelo. I mean, Golovkin was, overall the favorite against Canelo for all intents and purposes. But, the thing is that, Golovkin stated that he was going to fight Canelo Alvarez in Mexican style. And I knew that was not going to work because Canelo was going to be too quick. He was going to be too skilled for Golovkin in that rematch. So Lamont Roach is going to have to improve on a few things for the rematch. Will he? I doubt it, but we'll see. And Gervonta Tank Davis needs to stop bitching to the referee. Like, anytime a fighter actually puts him in a real fight, this dude is always looking at the referee or talking to the referee to save his ass. Like, bro, just fucking fight. Like, you're supposed to be one of the top pound for pound fighters in the world, and you got this dude overall asking for help. Like, come on.
So Lamont Roach came out stating that during the fight against Gervonta, there was a moment or a sequence where Gervonta tried to bite him. And he pointed it out, as you guys see on the video. Gervonta went Mike Tyson mode. I guess if you're going to be known or labeled as Baby Iron Mike, you got to go out like him. Edgar Berlanga did it, now Tank tried to follow up with it. However, Gervonta didn't really go all out with the
That's crazy. I didn't even know that Edgar Berlanga actually tried that. Oh, that's wild.
bite or followed up with it. But for Gervonta to resort to biting Lamont Roach to begin with, that shows he was frustrated during the fight. And he was trying everything and anything to get Lamont.
Almost this once again. That's why I say it looked exactly like when Mike Tyson bit Evander's ear. Because he tilted his head to the side, you know, but it didn't look like his head was close enough in order to get his ear or his face. So I wonder if Gervonta was just doing it in order to possibly fluster Lamont Roach, and maybe he wasn't trying to, you know, bite down on it. But either way, man, it's like Gervonta was a dirty bastard in this fight.
Roach off his game. But Lamont Roach was dialed in, he was focused and determined to beat Gervonta that night. And he came really close to doing it. He ended up with a draw. I mean, if the referee ruled Gervonta taking a knee as a knockdown, as he should have had, especially after he started counting, then Lamont Roach will be the winner right now. We yet to see if this is going to be a Buster Douglas moment for Lamont Roach, or if this is going to be Lamont Roach version of Holyfield versus Mike Tyson.
Well, I'm glad that AKHi TV actually mentioned that. Because whenever it comes to certain fighters that end up beating a certain fighter, certain people, whenever they want to boost up the resume of a fighter that they like, but they also want to tear down the resume of another fighter that they don't like, they'll take a look at a fighter, for example, like a Jeff Horn, who got one great win in his career over Manny Pacquiao, but then never won shit for the rest of his career. And they say, oh, well, he got that win over Manny Pacquiao. You know, that's more than what a lot of other fighters can say. Right, but there's always a few fighters like this every single generation to where they get one outstanding win. You know, there's that one guy that you never expect them to do that. They get one, you know, tremendous and outstanding win, and they never get another good win in their career. Like Leon Spinks was that guy back in Muhammad Ali's time. He got that one great win over Ali. Never really beat anybody ever again. Buster Douglas was that guy against Mike Tyson. Then he came in with man titties against Evander Holyfield, got knocked out, I believe, in like 3 to 4 rounds, you know, when it came down to, you know, then of course, you know, you had Ricardo Mayorga, the great win over, you know, the great Vernon Forrest, never beat any really A-grade level fighter again after that. Like, there's fighters like this every single generation. So I'm glad that AKHi TV at least kind of made that, because, you know, people try to play stupid whenever it comes to certain fighters that they want to boost up and tear down, and they want to try to boost up their resumes to make them look greater than what they actually are. No, there are certain fighters that have the quote-unquote Buster Douglas syndrome, to where they only have one great night and they're never heard from again.
Does Lamont Roach have Gervonta number? The way
Another great example, Tony Harrison.
Holyfield did against Mike Tyson. Only time will tell. We shall see in the rematch how that's going to play out. Obviously, the reason why Mike Tyson bit Holyfield was because he was frustrated. Now, Tyson said after the fight, I got tired of him fouling me with his head because he kept leaning in with his head and using it for defense in the pocket. Mike Tyson pointed out that Holyfield was headbutting me the whole time, and the referee...
And what I'll personally state is this. You know, Mike Tyson states that, you know, that Evander Holyfield was using his head. What I will personally state is this, because a lot of people end up debating that. You know, I think that Evander Holyfield was kind of a fighter that at times would use his head, and you can see it a little bit in my personal view in the Mike Tyson fights. He did end up headbutting Mike Tyson quite a bit. You know, now that being stated, it was also very obvious that Evander Holyfield, that his skill set and his willingness to challenge Mike Tyson in a range that he thought no one would ever dare challenge him in, that it also was giving him a lot of resistance and that it was giving him a lot of problems. But Evander Holyfield, he was known as a fighter to where certain fighters that would fight him, even the great Lennox Lewis, who was greater than both Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, even he would say that Evander Holyfield used his head like a battering ram. So Evander Holyfield, with that big ass head of his, Evander was a great fighter. He was an all-time great fighter. But he would use his head as a battering ram. Yes, he would.
He wasn't doing anything about it. So I took it to my own hand and I did something about it, which is obviously the wrong approach. You don't bite somebody because you think they are headbutting you, using their head for defense on some Hopkins shit. Either way, when it
I'm glad that AKHi TV said that. I'm glad that he said overall on some Hopkins shit. And of course, he's talking about B-Hop, Bernard Hopkins, who was a bitch, by the way, a lot of the times in the ring, who would pull all these, little bitch ass dirty tactics. And listen, Bernard Hopkins is an all-time great level fighter. I think that he's a bit overrated, but he is an all-time great level fighter. He got a lot of great wins over Winky Wright and, John Pascal and Felix Tito Trinidad and Antonio Tarver. He got a great amount of wins. But he also was a guy that would pull almost any trick that he possibly could, whether it would be, low blows or throwing lower to the belt. He would use his head like a damn battering ram, like from Lord of the Rings. He overall, would, try to, get the referee, overall to, get him overall to have injuries or, fake injuries, or try to, like what's the word that I'm using or that I'm looking for? To really like exaggerate his injuries or falling down or something like that in order to possibly get a point deducted or a disqualification. So I'm glad that AKHi TV, especially coming from him, someone who's very racially biased a lot of the times in my view, I'm very glad overall that he mentioned that, because I get certain people that come in my comment section saying like, you don't know what you're talking about with B-Hop. You don't give B-Hop the respect that he deserves. B-Hop, in my view, gets a little bit more respect for what he deserves. Not only in terms of his career, which in my view is a tad bit overrated, because although he was great for what he was able to do, especially for his age, a lot of the times when he was in the bigger fights against guys his own size that could actually handle his talent or of similar talent caliber, he lost, whether it be against Calzaghe or Prime Roy Jones or, what was his name? Jermaine Taylor, Chad Dawson, certain guys like that. Just is what it is. But then on top of that, he was a dirty bastard. He was a guy, like if you want to take a look at a guy that really used his headbutt as a battering ram, you're talking about Bernard Hopkins. People thought Evander Holyfield was bad, or Sean Porter or Timothy Bradley were bad. No, Bernard Hopkins would literally charge in with his head first. Like there's literally compilations of it.
comes to Gervonta, he was throwing everything at Lamar Roach. And Lamar Roach kept coming like a bully, like a pit bull.
Yes, and oftentimes fighters that end up bullying or knocking out their opponents, once they finally get pushed back, they oftentimes cannot handle that. Now, I think that Gervonta more than likely has a little bit more to his game than that, but that's why oftentimes, just like representative of life, bullies oftentimes more than likely, they don't really have that much depth to them. Just like it pretty much is the same thing with fighters, like bully fighters. Not stating overall that those guys are like weak mentally or anything like that, but a lot of times bully fighters or certain fighters like that like to break down their opponents like that, they get exposed pretty quickly, at least against the elite caliber competition, because they end up pretty much only fighting in one way and have one mindset. That's why when Mike Tyson, whenever he would finally fight someone that could actually fight and fight back, he pretty much lost and got his ass kicked. Same with Deontay Wilder, same with Isaac Pitbull Cruz, same overall with certain other fighters of that style. George Foreman. If you got past George Foreman's game plan A, he didn't have shit afterwards. And he'll even tell you that now. Is what it is.
Bull at Gervonta. And I know that was frustrating Gervonta because he's like, man, I hit this guy with some clean shots. And he keeps on coming and giving just as much he was taking, if not giving.
Well, to be honest, if you're asking me who I thought was landing the clearer shots, I thought it was clearly the Mount Roach. To be honest with you, other than body shots in the early part of the fight, and let me also state this, I don't think this fight was a quote-unquote robbery per se. If I was going to give it to either person, I would give it to Lamar Roach Jr., but I don't really mind the draw. I did state that I think the fight should be overturned because I think that it was absolutely ridiculous that, Steve, or whatever, Steve Willis, I believe is his name, that he actually let Gervonta take a knee in the middle of combat after certain punches were thrown, and that it was not counted as a knockdown. I think that that's, that to be honest with you, that even a blown call where a punch lands, I think that that can even be a little bit more explainable because, at certain times maybe the referee could see a feet tied up, or, maybe he didn't see what we saw. But at the end of the day, there's no possible way that you can't say that he didn't see what we saw. We all saw the same thing. He took a knee. So, I mean, it is what it is. Now, understandably, it didn't look like Lamont Roach Jr., of course, took any hard shots. But at the end of the day, it still was, a few seconds prior, punches were still exchanged. So that still had to be counted as a knockdown. It is what it is.
More. Now, here is the even more surprising part, is the fact that it was Lamont Roach that ended up hurting and stunning Gervonta on more than one occasion. Tank buckled a couple times during the fight. And Gervonta, he tried more than one approach to cause distraction during the fight. He hit Lamont Roach with a good low blow at one point. He shoulder bumped his head at another point on some UFC shit. I ain't talking about the...
Agreed, AKHi TV. Thank you for bringing that shit up because almost no one else is bringing that up. I don't know why no one else but me and finally AKHi TV is mentioning that. I have no idea why. There's no way that you're allowed to do that in a boxing ring. Now, you can kind of use your shoulder, I believe, to kind of put their head maybe in a certain position, but you can't just like lift your shoulder up and shoulder someone straight in the jaw. And he did it like right in front of the referee. And the referee, that's why Lamont Roach like was so pissed off. So many people were wondering like, why is Lamont Roach, why is he, getting, out of character? Is because the referee was allowing Gervonta Tank Davis to do repetitive, dirty shit.
Veteran move of shoulder bumping your opponent's shoulder to create space in the pocket and then...
Now let's rewind that.
Low blow at one point. He shoulder bumped his head at another point on some UFC shit. I ain't talking about the veteran move of shoulder bumping your opponent's shoulder to create space.
See, right after that, after punches are thrown, there's no way that you're going to sit here and tell me that that's not a knockdown. I'm sorry. Now, of course, it doesn't look like Gervonta Tank Davis looked like he was hit by anything, but it doesn't matter. Punches were just thrown. Like, it's not even like 10 seconds went by and no punches were thrown. Punches were literally thrown just 2 seconds before that. There's no way that that should have not been a knockdown. Terrible call. Terrible refereeing by Steve Willis. But I have no doubt in my mind that Al Heyman stated that, if you give the edge to anybody, give it to that of Gervonta Tank Davis because he is our golden goose. And if you overall make sure that things happen a certain way, I'll make sure that it is very rewarding for you. These referees are told that, believe it or not. And not just these guys, but referees all over in NBA, in NFL, in MLB. That's, to a certain degree, sports are somewhat scripted. They're not completely scripted, like what some people try to state. But, that's how they make sure that their stars stay in line, that their stars stay in the main popularity. That's how they, keep their revenue and their money. That's why so many robberies, quote unquote, happen in boxing. Or that's why if you have a close fight, more than likely, it'll either be a draw or they'll just give it to the A side because that's what they need.
In the pocket and then follow up with a punch. Nah, Gervonta actually shoulder bumped Lamont Roach's face. That's illegal. At a third point, Gervonta took a knee to buy some timeout. At a fourth point, he tried to bite Lamont Roach.
Agreed. So he had low blows. He shouldered him in the face. He took a knee, and then he tried to bite him. So it's like, once again, AKHi TV, all this shit you were talking on Tyson Fury with really no evidence whatsoever, overall, where is this same shit talk for Gervonta Tank Davis? So shouldn't Gervonta Tank Davis, at least according to you, be labeled as the dirtiest fighter ever?
What they say, once the bully get bullied, they resort to doing all type of stuff. And that's
absolutely
what Gervonta did against.
And that's going to be very interesting to see Gervonta Tank Davis later on because I do believe that he'll beat Lamont Roach Jr. in the rematch. But not just the rematch against Lamont Roach Jr., but even against future fighters like Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez. Will he be shown as a bully or a multidimensional fighter? We'll see.
Lamont Roach. When Tank kept throwing all them bombs at Lamont Roach and Lamont Roach just kept marching forward. Lamont Roach just kept marching forward. That broke Gervonta's spirit in terms of his confidence of knocking out Lamont Roach. Seeing how well Lamont Roach was eating his shots as if Gervonta can't punch. I mean, let's be real. It ain't like...
Well, there was a couple of times in my personal view that Lamont Roach was a bit stunned or hurt within the fight. Like I said, Lamont Roach has a little bit of a problem standing inside the range a bit too much. It's okay to stay inside the range at times in order to maybe counter and, block and slip a punch and parry. Like, all that is fine. But you got to use your feet to really, at times, also make sure to move in and outside of the range. You don't do it too much to the point to where, your opponent, to where you make it easy for them or too easy for them to land shots, and then you move out all the time, and then overall you can't land any shots of your own. But you still have to, get out of the range. That was both Lamont Roach's problem and also Jose Valenzuela's problem. Like, Jose got his ass kicked against Gary Antoine Russell because he couldn't really get anything going. Not only was he not throwing anything, because all of a sudden he thought he was this elite level boxer because he defeated a midget at the 140-pound weight class in Isaac Pitbull Cruz, someone that's an extremely one-dimensional fighter. And on top of that, he is not good at getting outside of the range. Lamont Roach Jr. needs to get outside of the range a little bit more.
Gervonta didn't land,
at least at certain times,
on Lamont Roach. In fact, Tank landed clean, explosive shots on Lamont Roach that would have had knocked out 98% of the fighters in boxing. But Lamont Roach showed that he had an iron chin. Ain't no doubt about that. Just like Holyfield showed against Mike Tyson. And that's part of the reason Holyfield gave Mike Tyson a hard time. One thing in common between Lamont Roach and Holyfield that gave Mike Tyson and Gervonta a hard time is their defense, their skill, their ability to fight in the pocket and throw short combat punches. Remember, Gervonta is way faster than Lamont Roach, but
I'm not sure if he's way faster than Lamont Roach, but I do believe that he's a bit faster. But I do agree a little bit with what AKHi TV is saying here about Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, but that's how you have to win a fight. You have to actually fight like you can win the fight. Many of these fighters end up going into the fight, and then once they really start to feel the power or really experience, some of that elite level fighters' abilities, then all of a sudden they start to lose confidence, and you realize that they don't even ever truly believe that they were going to win in the first place. Like when you take a look at Wilder sometimes against certain opponents, once he landed, his power shot or some of those punches, they started to retreat a little bit more. Same thing with Gennady Golovkin. That's why when Gennady finally met a fighter that actually believed that they could beat him in Canelo, he had problems, And then when you take a look at Tyson versus Holyfield, same thing. When you take a look, overall at other fighters, it's the same thing. Like Canelo Alvarez, for example, when he fought Caleb Plant. I think that that's an A-grade level win, but you could tell that Caleb Plant, that either A, that he didn't believe that he was ever going to beat Canelo in the first place, or B, that he thought he was going to, but then in the middle of the fight, he said, Canelo was a little bit too good. Because when he said that thing about, I'm a pretty good fighter, what that basically is him stating is that, please respect me, or acknowledge that, overall that, I'm a good fighter, because I know that eventually you're going to stop me. And I kind of seen a similar thing with Frank Martin with that of Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, he didn't state anything, but, he was doing very good in the first half of the fight. But then once Gervonta really started to land power shots, he really was not doing enough and showed enough confidence in order to really beat Gervonta. He was just retreating a whole lot. And I mean, he was doing some good work. He was throwing, but, he just wasn't doing enough to really win the fight against Gervonta. You got to take the fight to someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis in order to win the fight. He's an exceptional level talent. And in order to beat an exceptional level talent, you have to bring the fight to them. You can't just stand back. You have to really bring the fight to them.
a lot of times Lamont Roach was beating Gervonta to the punch. That's because he had great timing. More importantly, his shots were short and compact. He was beating Gervonta to the punch. The way Gervonta throws them wild haymakers, even though they come at a great power and speed, similarly to how he knocked out Gamboa, you can get beat to the punch throwing them haymakers that's wild like that. If your opponent has great timing and he's going to throw short, compact punches the way Lamont Roach was throwing, Muhammad
Just to talk about the Gervonta Tank Davis versus Yuriorkis Gamboa fight very quickly. Because I've had certain people, of course, come in my comment section whenever I talk about Canelo Alvarez, and they're like, "Oh, well, Canelo Alvarez, he fought a lot of guys that were quote unquote washed up, and blah blah blah." No, Canelo fought a lot of the guys when they were champions. Like I said, in my view, Canelo has 11 A grade level wins in his career. The first A grade level win he has was Austin Trout. That's when Austin Trout was a champion and undefeated. The second one he had was against Lara. Now, Lara was not a champion at the time, at least not a legitimate one, but he was, in my personal view, an undefeated fighter because, of course, the only loss that he really had on his resume was against Paul Williams, which, by the way, I think most people would probably agree that if it's not the worst robbery of all time, it's probably top 5 in boxing history. Like, it's one of the worst decisions that I've ever personally seen in my life. But anyways, then, of course, you got, the win over Lara, who eventually became a two-way division champion. Then after that, of course, you got the win over Miguel Cotto when he was the WBC and ring middleweight champion. Then of course after that he got the win over Gennady Golovkin when he was a unified champion. Then after that he beat Danny Jacobs when he defeated the undefeated Sergey Derevyanchenko and ended up becoming a two-time two-time champion. Then after that, I believe he ended up defeating Callum Smith, who was the Ring Magazine and I believe the WBA champion there. So that's 6 guys I'm already talking about. Then after that he fought Billy Joe Saunders, who I believe was a champion. Then after that, I believe he fought Caleb Plant, who was a champion. Then after that, I believe he fought Sergey the Crusher Kovalev, or I think he may have fought Sergey Kovalev before Caleb Plant. But Sergey Kovalev was a champion when Canelo had fought him and was coming off of wins over 2 undefeated top contenders at that weight class, very athletically talented and gifted. And then after that, I believe he had fought Jamel Charlo, who was the unified champion, someone at 154. And then he fought Jaime Munguia, who was not a champion, but was undefeated and a former champion at 154. So that's why I say, like, when people state all this shit about, oh, Canelo, he fought all these guys when they were washed up. I mean, he fought guys like Sugar Shane Mosley when they were washed up. He fought, Kermit Syndrome when he was washed up. And certain guys like that, maybe Carlos Baldomir, but he didn't fight all those other guys when they were washed up. When you want to talk about champions that are washed up or guys that were like washed up, like I have certain Gervonta Tank Davis fans or people saying like, oh, well, don't forget Gervonta, he ended up defeating Yuriorkis Gamboa. Like, bro, Gamboa had already been knocked out like 3 times at that point in time. Like, he was done. Gamboa was done ever since he got knocked out by Crawford. He was never the same. He was never championship caliber ever again after that. Like when it's kind of like when you take a look at Crawford's resume, for example. Like people always say, oh, well, Crawford, he fought Kell Brook and Amir Khan. Amir Khan was knocked out 3 times, by the time that Terence Crawford had fought him. And he was visibly never the same after Canelo had knocked him out. Like never the same ever again. Like Canelo took that dude's soul. There was nothing left. And then Kell Brook, he also had nothing left after the Errol Spence Jr. knockout. He had, still some greatness and some goodness when he fought Errol Spence. He had nothing left by the time he fought Crawford. So that's why I say, like, you got these people saying, like, oh, this guy was washed up, this guy was washed up. And most people don't even know what that fucking means. Just because you're a little bit older in age or just because you have a loss doesn't mean that you're always washed up. Washed up, in my personal view, what that means is that you have no chance at becoming a champion ever again, or you're clearly such a big shell of yourself that you're not even recognizable. Kell Brook and Amir Khan, by the time that they had fought Terence Crawford, they were washed up. When you want to talk about, overall, say Canelo when he fought Shane Mosley was washed up. Those are example of fighters that are washed up. But Gamboa was washed up against Gervonta Tank Davis. But for example, like when people try to state that Canelo fought a washed Danny Jacobs, all that is bullshit. Danny Jacobs had, I believe 2 losses on his resume, but one was to Dmitry Pirog, who was a great middleweight champion before the back injury and before he had to retire, and of course Gennady Triple G Golovkin.
Ali showed us that,
which was a very close decision, by the way,
against George Foreman. Holyfield showed us that against Mike Tyson and Lamar.
And to bring up another point, now that I think of it, you have so many of these channels that love to say that Canelo Alvarez, for example, that he fought a washed Danny Jacobs because he had just lost to Golovkin not too long ago. Aren't these the same channels that claim that Danny Jacobs got robbed against Golovkin? Like they stated that Danny Jacobs beat Golovkin? Like these fucking guys, man.
Roach was doing that.
And don't get it twisted. Like, you have many other channels out here that pull the same bullshit, whether it be with black fighters because they don't like black fighters or other fighters as well. But like I said, you can't trust these channels as far as you can see them sometimes.
Against Gervonta. Just like Holyfield versus Mike Tyson, the fact that Lamont Roach was familiar with Gervonta. He had fought him before in the amateurs, similarly to Holyfield and Mike Tyson. Also,
Well, sometimes, I mean, that means something, but sometimes it doesn't. I mean, maybe did it help? I don't know. I'd have to take a look at the amateur matches. But, more than likely, if I had to guess, it's probably just that Lamont Roach Jr., he studied Gervonta Tank Davis very well. And, I mean, maybe it could have been, but then what that would have to mean is that, that Gervonta Tank Davis hasn't really improved that much ever since the amateurs. I'm not sure if I'm willing to bet on that, but, I guess I'd have to look. But more oftentimes than not, when you take a look at the amateurs, certain fighters, especially once you get to Gervonta's level, they usually end up improving by a few levels.
the fact that Lamont Roach had great iron chin, defense, skill, good footwork, and he was just all around well-schooled fighter that could fight in the pocket and the outside, that could control distance, that could counter and take a punch to give a punch, which is something crazy to do against Gervonta. I can tell.
Well, it's something that's crazy overall, maybe to the average person, but it's something that you're going to have to do, in order to beat Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, you don't want to go blow for blow with Gervonta Tank Davis because you're not going to win that fight unless you're someone like a Teofimo Lopez or something, but, or Shakur Stevenson. And of course, I couldn't even say that with a straight face. But I mean, thing is overall, point is that even if you're a very powerful puncher, you don't want to go just completely blow for blow or completely brawl with Gervonta Tank Davis unintelligently. But what Lamont Roach Jr. was able to do is that he was able to keep his defense up and that he was able to fight like a man against Gervonta Tank Davis and really get in there. Same thing with Evander Holyfield against Mike Tyson. You have to really sometimes try to outfight these guys.
Tell you this, Lamont
Or at least show that you're willing to fight them and stand your ground.
Roach had
Because oftentimes, once again, many fighters, they'll claim that they're willing to do, anything it takes in order to beat these fighters, but then they don't fight like that. They end up taking one or good two shots, then they start backing up and really retreating, and then it gasses them out, and then they end up eventually getting knocked out.
a brilliant game plan, and he executed it perfectly because he was waiting on Gervonta to throw, and he will time him to throw shorter shots and counter Gervonta offense. Both fighters made great adjustments during the fight. However, Lamont Roach made...
No, Gervonta Tank Davis did not make great adjustments in the fight. What great adjustments did he make? Did his jab get better as the fight would go along? Did he have a better left hand? Like, stop treating Gervonta Tank Davis with kitty gloves overall just because he's a black fighter. But then, when it comes to Canelo Alvarez or Usyk or a non-black fighter that, overall that you have to try to tear down, all of a sudden, you tear them down with no holds barred. Like, please.
more adjustments as the fight went on. Usually we see...
Like I said, if this would have been Canelo or Usyk, all these pro-blackity-black LDBC new media channels, all of them would have been on their ass, claiming about how overrated they are and see, they have the complexion for the protection, but because it's Gervonta Tank Davis, someone who's a black fighter overall that they have to try to protect, and overall try to, put as a top pound-for-pound fighter because they have to keep this narrative going that, fighters like Usyk or Inoue or, guys like that they can't be the number one pound-for-pound fighter even eventually, even if they deserve to be there. Now, right now, I wouldn't say that Inoue really deserves to be there, but I would say that Usyk, in my personal view, does with what he's recently been able to accomplish. So just stop bullshitting.
Gervonta take over in the later rounds, but that wasn't the case against Lamont Roach. Now, Gervonta showed that he's a veteran fighter at this point. Obviously, he's going to do what he has to do to win a fight. It doesn't matter what he got to do, from taking a knee to throwing a low blow to shoulder bumping his opponent and even to biting his opponent to cause distraction and frustrate his opponent. Lamont Roach wasn't having any of that, though. He had an answer for everything and anything Gervonta did, which made for a great fight. Now, you see, Gervonta said that he has more skills than every fighter in the game. Well, he showed against Lamont Roach that when his skills are not enough, what he's gonna do is resort to dirty tactics. As
Well, AKHi TV, why don't you bite the bullet and state overall about Gervonta Tank Davis the same shit that you would say about Canelo Alvarez or Usyk or Inoue if they were in this similar position? Because if this was Inoue or Usyk or Canelo Alvarez, all you would be stating is that this fight proved that their skill set is massively overrated and that overall that they don't have more skills than this A&A fighter. So what Gervonta Tank Davis, at least so far, and listen, I'm not a person that trashes a fighter over one particular fight, because one fight is not a complete representation of your whole skill set or your whole entire career. But this is not the first time I've seen Gervonta Tank Davis have a shaky performance. Like, I seen his shaky performance over Isaac Cruz. You know, I see, honestly, it's not like he was super dominant over Rolly Romero or Hector Garcia. This is not like a one-time thing. Gervonta Tank Davis, to be quite honest with you, he's not a supremely dominant fighter. He gets the knockouts, but in terms of actually, like, you know, overall actually winning the majority of the rounds, he's not one of those fighters that really has done that.
a veteran fighter should. So we shall see what happens in the rematch. I can't wait to see it. Reports came out that Gervonta versus Lamont Roach sold 150,000 on pay-per-view. But that was
Which is awful when you talk about the numbers, because nobody really wanted to see this fight. nobody on the planet Earth really wanted to see this fight. If you're supposed to be one of the main faces of boxing, and I pretty much predicted that that fight would not really do that great. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe those are not the final numbers. But I don't really doubt it, because no one really wanted to see this fight. Pretty much people knew that, you know, this was a fight that almost nobody wanted to see. Now, the rematch, you know, I think, of course, is going to do a lot better. You know, just like, you know, kind of what former fights of this archetype, you know, what they've done. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, once again, there's a reason why they did those numbers. People don't want to see this.
because
Or they didn't want to see this.
everyone was under the impression that Lamont Roach was basically another cherry-pick fight. Tank was a
Right, and had this been Canelo Alvarez or Alexander Usyk AKHi TV, you'd be calling this a trade pick gone wrong. So stop bullshitting. At the end of the day, you know, they keep trying to, like, do damage control, you know, overall, and stating that Gervonta Tank Davis said, oh, well, you know, Lamont Roach Jr. can really box. And yes, it's true, Lamont Roach Jr. really can box. But he's also a guy that lost to Jamel Herring, a guy that Shakur Stevenson pieced up about a few fights ago. He lost to Jamel Herring about 5 fights ago. You know, and then on top of that, he's a guy that only has 10 knockouts out of now 26 fights, you know, I believe, or 25 wins, you know, and he was a guy that had to move up in weight. Once again, if this was Canelo or Usyk that this happened to, you know, almost losing to a fighter that had to move up in weight, a guy that has what, like a 35% knockout ratio, we'd never hear the end of it.
16-1 favorite. So a lot of people didn't buy the pay-per-view due to that, especially when there were a lot of fighters in boxing that the fans wanted to see Gervonta fight instead of Lamont Roach. Well, guess what? The rematch is a different story now, because Lamont Roach showed that he can possibly beat Gervonta in the rematch, just like he almost did in the first fight. With that being said, go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe below.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it. Mr. AKHi TV, once again, I'll be waiting to see your comments, you, Dantes, and all these other guys stating about how Gervonta is so dirty and, you know, overall he's the dirtiest fighter in history, just like I heard with Tyson Fury, or how overrated he is, because we know we'd hear that with Canelo or Inoue or Usyk. I'll be waiting on these comments, but I bet I never hear them. So once again, you have to be very careful with these channels, man, because on the surface, you know, overall, they sound very, you know, good on the surface. But these guys are really more full of shit, you know, overall, than what you know. At least if you have a keen mind. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. But I just thought that I would talk about that because I noticed a certain amount of these things as well. But I did not notice the attempted bite, which, you know, not 100% for sure if it was completely an attempted bite. But, you know, according to the camera footage, it did look like one. So, is what it is. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see where this goes. And of course, when I say where this goes, I mean the rematch, because of course the NYASC, I believe the New York Athletic State Commission, they already stated that they're not overturning anything, which is pretty much completely what I had guessed, because if you know anything about boxing, they're not a sport that really overturns anything unless you're caught on something illegal like a performance-enhancing drug or something like that. And even then, sometimes it's hard to overturn the decision. But I mean, it is what it is. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see where this goes. And I'll talk to y'all later.